Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not the 101 in Dynasty rookie drafts. Welcome to the Footballguys Dynasty Show. I am your host, Chad Parsons. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, drafted in the first round, the only first-round running back in the 2020 NFL draft class. But Jonathan Taylor, we mentioned it in passing last week, the superior prospect of the running back class, but also superior prospect in the 2020 rookie class entirely. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of the weakest metric prospects to go in round one. He slipped in by a single pick. And I would argue Jonathan Taylor has the profile to go top 5, top 10, like we've seen with Ezekiel Elliott, we've seen with Saquon Barkley recently, with Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, etc. You want to talk about as close to bulletproof metric profile as you can get. Jonathan Taylor, outside of being a 5-star recruit, you love to see that as a running back prospect, but top 2% of my metric model predicting college prospects to fantasy production and viability for fantasy starter seasons in the NFL. True impact. He is a top 5% athlete, top 5% rushing score, and for folks that say he can't catch, top 20% in the entire model, which goes back to 1999 of all prospects that were drafted, as well as dozens of undrafted players annually. So Jonathan Taylor, close to bulletproof at 226 pounds, running 4.39. Yet we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire going to the Kansas City Chiefs, propped up by situation. Yes, he's young, but at a tweener, 207 pounds, ran about a 4.6. Not the big explosive athlete, not the home run threat, largely propped up by situation. And in Dynasty, it's about talent over situation. Clyde Edwards-Helaire would not be anywhere close to the 101 if not for that landing spot. He goes basically anywhere else. He does not go 101. And that to me reeks of making a poor historical decision at the 101 this year if you go with Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I'm Jordan McNamara, and I agree, Chad. I agree. I think one of the more telling things has been the jump that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has had in the drafts that I've been tracking pre and post draft in terms of Superflex startup drafts. He's jumped more than 4 rounds since the NFL draft, and Jonathan Taylor has stayed exactly where he was. So you're seeing it's entirely a reaction to where he went in the draft, higher than we expected, where he went physically in terms of Kansas City. I think this is one of the premier landing spots. However, I'll say, we can have a big debate about Damian Williams. And that was a big last year debate. He's not going to just go away. And they have some other players there in terms of a guy we like, Darrell Williams. They have Darwin Thompson as well. So this isn't just a job that he's going to come in and take 15 plus touches a game, at least in my opinion. And I think people projecting that have to be a little bit more cautious. I think with Taylor, you have that profile. I think if there's one place to quibble, it's the raw receiving numbers, which is coming out of a Wisconsin system that is not high volume in terms of passing, in terms of passing attack. It's a very run-centric offense, so you see Clyde Edwards-Helaire with a lot more catches at LSU. It's primarily a factor of the fact that they were more of a passing offense. And if you sort of look at some of the ancillary stuff like market share, which I know you incorporate into that top 20% model, and yards per route run, which is another advanced metric for running back receptions, you'll see those two things are really prop up Jonathan Taylor as a receiver. You do see last year he had basically almost 2 catches a game. It was a very similar career arc in terms of receiving production to a guy like Ray Rice, who had low total numbers his first 2 years, took a jump up his third year, or his last year and college, and then came into the NFL and was a 2-way producer. So I'm with you on the Taylor aspect of it. And I think Edwards-Helaire is overpriced. Although I'll say at this point, Jonathan Taylor is firmly is ahead of him. I wouldn't say firmly, but he is ahead of him in ADP. The drafts that I'm tracking, Jonathan Taylor 2.4 in Superflex. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is at 2.8.
Yeah, and the point is it's contested. The point is it's
Mhm.
not a clear cut. Everyone's taking Jonathan Taylor ahead. It is contested, and you shouldn't be surprised to see either ordering. And yeah, just to hit on what you said about market share, that is something that in my model I track breakouts. And that is dependent on age for rushing for running backs, but also the thing that was really a breakthrough for me 2 to 3 years ago. It took a lot of data diving. It's not something easily transposed into something sortable and trackable, but pretty much going back and doing it by hand through back to 1999 and all running backs, all these backfields of looking at the running backs only. And Jonathan Taylor had a massive, again, running back only market share of yardage there as a receiver. He had a breakout as an 18-year-old freshman. He broke out to an elite level in that regard at 19 again, 20 again. He has 3 straight seasons, and yet Edwards-Helaire has only one dominant receiving season, and that was at 20 years old this past year at 2019. So Jonathan Taylor, if you look at market share, he's actually a more proven, a more look at that workhorse. And people that want to say, oh, the workload that he had at Wisconsin, that's a bad thing. It means he can hold up. Clyde Edwards-Helaire does not have the same track record of saying he can be a workhorse. And I think you even look and transpose that into the Kansas City offense and you say, what are they built on? They're built on committees. They're built on almost like the 49er model of we'll take anybody and everybody in terms of what is your role. And I think the other dangerous thing is when you take Edwards-Helaire or any player, Keyshawn Vaughn, we might be looking at you, and a player that wasn't there pre-draft, and now we're putting you, David Montgomery, into a position where your landing spot is determining our value on why I'm picking you. Dynasty is about the long haul. It's not redraft. We're not looking at the first 8 games, 12 games of your rookie season and saying, that's why I'm selecting you where I am. It's about the long-term value and rising of the talent eventually prevailing. And with Edwards-Helaire, I have a feeling if he is not by mid-season the clear starter with the Chiefs, that's going to be a massive disappointment to folks that spent 101 or even 102 in a stock league on him, as opposed to a player that you might trust longer term. And I think the thing you spoke about, which is look at the difference between pre-draft and post-draft, and that's really all you need to know. Taylor was here already, and nothing should have changed, and Edwards-Helaire was not here. And the thing I would point out about, again, you have to draw a line in the sand eventually and say, that guy was a round 1 pedigree, that guy was day 2 or round 2, round 3, whatever it is. Yes, you have to put that threshold marking somewhere. That line in the sand, you were in this round, you were not in this round. But let's look at it more granular. We had 32 overall by Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And so we were talking about that on Thursday night of the draft for a live show. We were saying only one running back got in. And then yet, 3 picks later, what did we see? DeAndre Swift goes. 9 picks later, Jonathan Taylor, less than half a round. Then within, again, by the end of round 2, we also had Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon snuck in there, and Antonio Gibson was early in the first few picks of round 3. The point is, this was a contested top grouping, even though Edwards-Helaire was the first one off the board. It was the start of a tidal wave, the start of an avalanche at the position that pretty much flowed over the next 20 picks with a number of high pedigree and, frankly, more worthy metric prospects than Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, and when we went to bed on Thursday night, I think the consensus was at that point that Kyle Edwards-Helaire was going to be the 101 in terms of, we'll call it non-super flex. He was going to be the first non-quarterback off any board. That changed quickly. And I'll say that Taylor, I think, got the perfect landing spot because it's a top 3 offensive line in the NFL. And what I was worried about is that he was going to slide a little bit and not land in an optimal landing spot. The market loved the landing spot because it pegged essentially the number, right? His stock has not changed. His stock hasn't moved. It's moved like a half a point in terms of ADP. So that's essentially the market being precisely right on where he was. So I think that's, and you look at those big risers, that always gives me concern because you're reacting to things that you're reacting too much to situation. You're reacting too much to
the jersey.
Yeah. And again, it was a surprise. I think it's warranted that he moves up because it was a surprise that he went that high. So, right, we should regress our beliefs pedigree to a point. But that point to me just clearly isn't ahead of Jonathan Taylor. And so Jonathan Taylor, at least for me, I don't know about you, he is tied for the most owned Dynasty rookie that I've had across my drafts. I think I own him in about 45% of my leagues. And I've actually gotten lucky. I've gotten him at 103 at a handful of spots in Superflex. So has fallen behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a couple of points, and I was a benefactor of that.
Jordan, this is a projection and a mystical question because we'll never know and we'll never get the potential. But if Kansas City had taken Jonathan Taylor, in addition to the internet at both of our houses going down at that moment, what do you think in a startup draft? Give me your best guess. Because again, we saw Edwards-Helaire, the big move. Part of it was landing with the Chiefs. Part of it was being running back one, round one, all of those things. But Taylor goes 32 to the Chiefs. I guess we could just switch them. Edwards-Helaire goes to keep everything similar. But what do you think Taylor, does he get to Saquon Barkley level of startup draft valuation where it's just like round one? Because Edwards-Helaire is late first from what I've been seeing. Is Taylor a top 5 startup pick in like a start one quarterback format with that landing spot?
Yeah, so he's going 17.6 after the NFL draft in the drafts that I'm tracking him, and that is behind, I believe, 5 quarterbacks. So it's actually behind 6 quarterbacks, and it's super flex. It's the data that I'm tracking. So you take that out of there. That is just inside a 12 ADP. So that is first round. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is just outside that number. So Taylor in a start one league, assuming you don't have Mahomes or Lamar Jackson as a first round startup pick and start one, Jonathan Taylor is essentially inside that line. So he is right there with Mixon and DeAndre Hopkins is a little bit ahead of them. I think that's warranted. And you just look at the 21-year-old running backs that go early in the draft. That's a platinum standard. And I think if the debate is interesting between a guy like Kamara, where he is in his prime, and
halfway through his prime.
And just the 2.5, 3 years of difference there in terms of age. I mean, that's an interesting debate.
It's significant in running back land is what we'll say, because a couple years of prime, and that you could expect running back one production, and they're far more insulated. In 2 years is Alvin Kamara age insulated. So a lot of things go along with that, just for backstory. Yeah,
absolutely. And you just, the comparison between the two of them right now, if Alvin Kamara were to blow out his knee, what would that do to his stock? The same thing with Jonathan Taylor. I don't think it would drop Jonathan Taylor that much. Kamara, you're a little bit older, you're sort of in a murky contract situation, all of those things. That's a much more dangerous proposition for a player like him. I think it's warranted. If he went, I mean, he would be pushing, he would be running back 3 off some draft boards. He would be behind Barkley and McCaffrey. This has sort of kept him under control, which I think is, honestly, if you're a fan of Jonathan Taylor, that's probably a good thing.
Yep. This is Chad Parsons and Jordan McNamara, episode 3 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Jordan, your Dynasty rankings are up at footballguys.com. We talked a little bit about quarterbacks last episode. This episode, we're going to focus on some of your more outlier rankings at running back. So a player that we have talked about a lot over the last 12 to 18 months. First time here for the Football Guys Dynasty Show. You are the highest of Football Guys rankers on Leonard Fournette.
Yeah. I think you and I were amongst the highest people that I heard last year coming into the season. We basically said the argument against Leonard Fournette is that he has not stayed healthy, and that is he has not stayed healthy yet. And when he stays healthy, what is he capable of? I think you and I were the most bullish people that I had heard on Leonard Fournette in terms of what his upside could represent, and I don't think either one of us in our wildest dreams would have written down 100 targets as a potential 2019 stat for him. And so I think that is a whole new world for him in terms of production. If you had told me that he would have, less than 8 touchdowns last year, but finish in the top 10, I would have said there's just no way those two things don't match. So basically you get an entire answer to his profile, which is, yes, he's capable of producing fantasy points as a receiver. What you didn't get last year was any touchdowns, and he just took a beating in the red zone. I was just looking up the stats earlier today. 45 carries inside in the red zone last year, 58 yards. When you go inside the 10, 23 carries for 14 yards. Inside the 5, 8 carries, -2 yards. So he basically got wiped out inside
Moving
the red zone.
backwards.
Yeah, just not effective. And I remember there was some carries last year. I think there was a series where he had like 3 in a row, and it was just like, loss of a yard, loss of 2 yards, loss of 5, and it was like, all right, now we're kicking a field goal, and it's just, he had just moved all the way back, and I think those things will correct, and some of that's bad luck too. So I think you can expect that to bounce back. And now that we know he's got the receiving profile, I think legitimately, he's got running back 1 overall upside in a season if things break right, and you're getting him in the teens of the position. I mean, I really like that. Where I think the question is what you have to be careful about the cost is, it's almost a year-to-year play. But when you sort of look at the players that he's going around, a lot of them are year-to-year plays too. And I think we get a little bit too caught up in the long term of Dynasty at that particular cost. You look at him, I think he's a different player. He's a much better player than he was, much more focused, less of a headache in terms of getting in fights on the field and those sorts of things. He was a better citizen last year. I think that bodes well for hopefully a better 2020 season for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, a couple of historical notes. Looking at my running back index, as I call it, just kind of looking at some career arcs and things. He has 3, and I don't think many people would guess this. He's finished in the top 12 in points per game 3 straight years to begin his career. Top 5 pick, so you expect early opportunity. He's gotten exactly that. So even when he has played, he's been impactful. He's been a workhorse, and that's hard to find in today's NFL. The other active backs that have started with 3 top 12 seasons to begin their career that are currently in the NFL: Adrian Peterson, I've heard of that guy; Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara. And so Kamara is only through 3 years as well. You mentioned him in passing a few minutes ago, but the other ones have 4, 5, and 8 running back 1 seasons. So I would agree that Le'Veon Bell might be the closest comp of that in terms of, boy, he got sort of mid-career, ended up holding out, changed teams. We could definitely be seeing that sort of career arc of uncertainty with Leonard Fournette. I actually think Le'Veon Bell's a buy too, just because of his profile and his cost. And Leonard Fournette costs more. He's younger, and he's on a 1-year deal. He's probably going to be on a team that stinks. None of these things are good, but that's why, again, you're getting a discount off of Jordan. Shouldn't a guy that finishes 3 straight top 12 seasons with his pedigree at his age be, an unquestioned first round type startup pick or top 20 at an absolute minimum? And he largely is unmoved from a year ago in terms of he has that season. He puts it together. He's not hurt. And like you said, he had no puck luck with touchdowns and goal line opportunities in terms of converting yet. He puts that all together. You enjoy a running back 9 point per game season, and yet, we still don't like that guy is the general Dynasty market perception. I find that fascinating. I find that me wanting to buy in. One trade I found that I thought was interesting was someone traded Austin Eckler for Leonard Fournette plus, and you just kind of mentioned, kind of betting on what is most likely to happen. Austin Eckler, I loved him when he was cheap, and we picked up shares, and then all of a sudden he has a monster PPR season with Melvin Gordon out for most of it. And now all of a sudden everyone's buying in, and now I'm out. It's sort of like that moving needle of targeting, where it's like all of a sudden I'm over here, the market's over there, and now I want to be over there because they're over here. They joined me. So I think Leonard Fournette is kind of the same way, except, it's like almost no matter what he does, he has a stink on him in dynasty leagues that people they don't want anything to do with him. I'll tell you right now, and I've mentioned this to you, I think off air, over the last 6-12 months of just, watching every game, watching every carry. It's like, I don't know how good he is. It's just like he runs into guys. He's not overly agile, but you know what? He can break a long play. He's prototypically sized. And the big part you said, he catches the ball. He's a workhorse 3-down guy, picks up pass protection. You have none of those concerns. Like you said, some of the quibbles about, attitude or, getting into fights on the field, things like that, pretty much haven't heard a peep in a while. So even if he changes teams, he's one of those that you would expect, almost like a Todd Gurley, until he's out of the league, probably going to be resurfacing for future starter work and a strong workload as long as he's physically capable. And I think Fournette, like a Gurley from this past offseason, a lot of hand wringing probably for Fournette after the 2020 season, but I think it's going to be all good dynasty wise, and someone that you have to just embrace the variance of, yeah, maybe the wheels come off in 18 to 24 months, but until then you got to keep riding it.
Yeah, absolutely. 79% is if you take, I have a metric called density, which is you basically take a player where they are right now. Where he is in terms of first round pedigree and the hits to date, you can 79% of the time running backs hit again. So that's a really, really good number in terms of what his prior comparable players are. So I'm a big fan, and especially at when you sort of get into that tier, you have questions with guys like Aaron Jones and Melvin Gordon, and there's a range of players you have questions on. I think in terms of sometimes you just have to take a look at, hey, what's the next year look like? I think a lot of times, especially at running back. So yeah, I'm bullish on him at his cost. And like you said, he basically has his best season of his career and ends up going down in price. I mean, he's going in the 5th round last year. I remember at the end of the offseason last year, I was picking him up in 5th round of Superflex startup drafts. And it's crazy. He's down, post draft, he's down about 9 picks. So that is he's going back to that same place where it's just like, all right, I'll just keep collecting, him on my team.
Yeah, and it's almost like you ask, what does he have to do? And the answer is nothing. He can't do anything. He will just never get to the promised land of, top 15, top 20, top 25, even dynasty startup. Now he's too old. He's already done enough. I mean, unless he finishes maybe as the number 1 overall running back, as you alluded to, is within his range of outcomes, considering his usage. What if his touchdowns pop up to 12? With all those targets on a team that's not projected to be that great, they didn't really add much behind him. So again, Leonard Fournette is one of our flagship players in terms of it doesn't make a lot of sense. And one thing you're going to hear as a theme is buying profiles and fading profiles in terms of historically what is most likely to happen. We're not big, and actually I'm alluding to maybe our next player we're going to discuss here of we're not big on betting on outliers and outlier scenarios. I do want to remind you, never miss a moment of the Football Guys show content, subscribing to Football Guys TV on YouTube. You can watch this show, a number of other shows for the Football Guys podcast and show channel. You can also subscribe, rate, and review Football Guys on all of your podcast platforms. Sign up for the daily email update delivered from Joe Bryant, your daily guide to all the news and instant analysis at footballguys.com/free. So another high variance ranking for you, Jordan, at Football Guys, you can find those dynasty rankings, is you're the lowest on Chris Carson. So there, he's coming back from injury, and a more significant injury is with Rashad Penny, former first-round pick. And they also they got Travis Homer coming back, and they drafted DJ Dallas. Always a revolving door that, you think back with Alex Collins, and the Seahawks have done a great job of scouting, especially non-round 1 running backs over the years recently. So Chris Carson, lowest on him of the ranking staff there for dynasty analysts at Football Guys.
Yeah, Carson coming off an injury at the end of last year, so that is a concern. That whole backfield is a little bit of a mash unit. One of the players that I liked coming into this offseason as just a really, really late round dart throw was Travis Homer, because I thought things could conceivably break right. DJ Dallas is there. It's a little bit more clouded, but I still think that same argument holds as whoever that running back 3 is. Rashad Penny has some injury concerns and hasn't really played up to the first round pedigree. But I look at Carson. I think he's outperformed his talent. And he's coming up on a contract. He has some injury, history going on. He has recovering from an injury now, and he has a big time fumble problem. And I look at the talent and I look at the pedigree, which is 7th round pedigree, and the density, the long-term hit rate at that pedigree is significantly different than it is at for a first round guy. So for example, like you'll see guys with Fournette's pedigree hit, there's hits for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in terms of first round guys, in terms of top 24 seasons, which really move the needle in terms of fantasy production. For running backs in the 7th round of the NFL draft, the most is 4. Right. So Carson's 2, but you just sort of look at the difference in terms of the historical profiles of those 2 pedigrees. It's a massive difference in terms of what you can expect and what you can and sort of project historically. And like you said, a lot of what we do is bet on profiles or make investments about profiles and about what players have done in the past and sort of what that might mean towards future production. And so with this, it's just a classic. I'm not really going to be in on that long-term profile. I mean, you and I have talked about this, I think off air, was the day 3 running backs, right? It's Lamar Miller, it's Jordan Howard, it's Devonta Freeman. And it's besides that, there's it's pretty rare to get longevity at the position at running back in terms of fantasy production. So Carson's at the end of his deal, and I'm concerned about a potential holdout and all of those things. It gives me concern. So that's why I'm lower on him than I think the market is.
Yeah, to go one other filtering that I did is the day 3 and undrafted running backs that I have in the index, that through 3 seasons they have running back 1 point per game season, like Chris Carson. And the interesting thing that, sometimes you find little nuggets like this that just perk your ears up, and none of the peers to Chris Carson have produced a second one, not one. So you're putting your dynasty poker chip on with Chris Carson and saying, I'm in now at his current marketplace. I'm not exploring a trade. I'm going to ride this out. If you have the ride it out mentality, again, this includes strong career starts like Alfred Morris, like CJ Anderson, Dion Lewis, Jordan Howard. Are you willing to bet on him as being an outlier of outliers? Because day 3 running backs producing a 1 running back 1 season, man, you just hit the lottery, because that doesn't happen. Being able to be a sustained starter for that length of time to produce that 1 season, even if you're an injury away, the fact that you got the keys to that backfield and produced well enough to be a top 12 running back on a point per game basis. Because again, you probably had part of the year where you weren't the starter, and that factors in and actually brings down the point per game aggregate average. So again, the trend is betting on the profiles, betting on the probabilities, and where the market is inefficient. And Chris Carson, again, he's been solid for 2 years. He squeaked into running back 1 last year at running back 12. And again, it's about cost and profiles. And to me, Carson is one that you're kind of betting on, yet he's held down. Rashad Penny's been injured a little bit. I thought at points he was coming on. They keep addressing the position. They've gotten production out of out of other profiles late to say, well, why is Chris Carson so special? Why are they going to ride him forever and a day? Why are they going to re-sign him to a big deal and say that you're our guy going forward? Is Carson really someone that's going to go to another team and all of a sudden be the 1A unquestioned going into that backfield? There is so much risk with someone like Chris Carson that A, this season doesn't work out, and B, this season at the most will be the best it will ever be going forward. This is Chad Parsons and Jordan McNamara, episode 3 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And another theme that we're going to have weekly is talking about dynasty trades, because there's so many angles between players, strategy, profiles, and just finding value, because other than drafting and the waiver wire, trading is where you improve your team. It's also where you can make some of the biggest mistakes out there outside of your startup draft or auction. And I do want to say that there is a thread over there at the Football Guys message board in the Shark Pool, and you can submit your trades that you would like to be included. It is called the Football Guys Dynasty Show Dynasty Trade of the Week. So if you want to be submitted, we actually have a few trades this week. And again, we will discuss it on the air, give some thoughts and our feedback. The first one, Jordan, is a win now team in a 1 quarterback league. They got Tyreek Hill, and the rebuilding team got A.J. Brown and Kareem Hunt. That is A.J. Brown and Kareem Hunt. So they get Tyreek Hill. The other rebuilding team gets A.J. Brown. What are your thoughts? Is that a win-win, or did one side, could they have extracted more out of this trade?
I think it's a win-win in terms of, I mean, A.J. Brown, he was really efficient last year in a way that we shouldn't expect again. So it's similar to some of the discussions we had about Lamar Jackson last year in terms of PPR production per target. I mean, AJ Brown was in a strata that is just not repeatable. I think it was 2.4, 2.5 points per target last year, and that is closer to about 1.6 historically, and that's a number that's pretty fluctuating year over year, and you don't expect it to repeat itself. So I do think in terms of AJ Brown, I think there is some, and you have to question how much volume is there going to be in a Derrick Henry led offense with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. It's just not throwing the ball to him 120, 130 times is what you really need for him to be a full on wide receiver one, to have a shot at a wide receiver one season. I just don't expect that type of volume. With Tyreek Hill, I think you have a lot of ceiling. And so if you're looking for a win now trade, Kareem Hunt's, I think, a nice piece. I don't think he's a build around type piece, but if you're in a rebuild and you say, hey, I can take on a player that's a little bit depressed in price, hope for some variance, hope for maybe things could break right. Nick Chubb gets hurt. He shows well, ends up in a second contract with somebody else with a lead role, all those things. Like, there is value upside on a player like Kareem Hunt. If I'm in a win now, I'd take the Hill side. But I see the value in both sides. I do think it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think it's pretty darn fair. And I don't say that about a lot of trades. I have initial thoughts where it's like, wow, that side is clearly what I prefer. But I think this actually worked out. I will say, kind of ending on the point you made, which is I wouldn't let Kareem Hunt be the reason you stand in a trade and say, I'm not going to make it. If Kareem Hunt is the part that is requested and required from the other owner, and you say, I'm a contender, I'm trying to get Tyreek Hill, I'm trying to get an auto start player, I think there is some risk that I don't have quite the ceiling from AJ Brown over the next even couple years. I'm attaching myself to a big play threat with Patrick Mahomes. Not a bad space to be. That don't let Kareem Hunt be the speed bump that stops your car from making that trade, is what I would say. And I have this plus 19% in my trade calculator, which means that, again, the best player premium for Tyreek Hill, typically it's about 15 to 30% is the fair zone, the perfectly equitable premium you pay for the best asset or best player in the deal. And that is right, in that middle zone. Actually could have maybe got a little bit more out of Tyreek Hill. But again, it's a fitting trade, I think, both ways. Let's shift over. We'll talk a little bit about Superflex and tight end premium. So this one, I'm sure, is going to be a little more disputed in terms of how fair this is. We have Jerry Jeudy. So quickly after drafting, didn't say anything about Devy. So we're going to assume probably drafted in that 105 to 108 or 109 range. And that is in a stock league, but it could fade, 2-3 extra spots in that later first round with Superflex. Traded for David Johnson, Van Jefferson, and a late 2021 first round pick. Your thoughts, Jordan?
Jeudy would be my thoughts. I mean, I guess here's what I would say. I can see the other side of it, which is that if you're contending and you're strong at wide receiver, you're hoping to get some help at running back, getting an influx like David Johnson, has some high ceiling. The problem is we haven't seen it recently. So I think there's risk in that. You insulated a little bit of that risk with that 2021 pick, but we've talked about the fact that it's a down class. So I think that is you don't expect to get a guy like Jerry Jeudy at that cost. And then Van Jefferson, I don't think much of him in terms of fantasy viability. He goes to a wide receiving core with good players on it already in terms of Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. They have Josh Reynolds ahead of him. So I'm not sure. He was not a great producer in college. And so if you on the other side of that, I mean, Judy's a very, what I would consider a very good prospect. Problem is you only expect about 55% of the round one wide receivers to hit, right? So there is some, while he can be a good wide receiver, there's still risk in that profile. So if I'm a contending team, I guess I see the other side. I would take Judy just because I think he's the most insulated and valuable. But I can see the other side of it if I was, if I was, I can see taking the other side of it.
Yeah, and even amongst the Senior Bowl wide receivers, when I was down in Mobile in January, Van Jefferson did not stand out. So just to say that to me, he was overdrafted by the NFL. I think he's an ancillary wide receiver, and I think you have to be very careful as a dynasty owner because the windows are so small of getting a number one receiver in the NFL is vitally important for your fantasy upside. And if you're going to be the number two, you better be on one of the best Chiefs. I'm looking at you, type offenses, a passing game, Cowboys passing offenses in the NFL. So Van Jefferson, he's got to get over two strong mid-career players at a minimum to be in that top one, top two on that depth chart alone. So Van Jefferson, again, a guy that didn't produce, he's not a freakish athlete, and now you're expecting him to just all of a sudden start producing in the NFL level on a depth chart that's pretty stacked. But if you want to break this down, so let's say Jerry Jeudy late first this year, and then David Johnson, let's say he's a round 2 cost, and then Van Jefferson, let's say round 3 cost, and you're getting a future first, that in a rookie pick only scope sounds fair. However, that late first next year in Superflex is more appealing than a start 1 with the strong quarterback class. If you roll snake eyes on David Johnson and this was about getting a running back, this trade turns ugly. I just think there's a lot of risk in that. And yes, maybe that late first could turn early, but to me, the risk is on that side of having it work out and getting some. If you don't get much out of David Johnson from this point forward or for your team, contending to get David Johnson as a starter for you, then again, this goes sideways pretty quick and you're really earmarking it on that pick alone to save you, where Judy's going to be insulated for a little while. Let's talk about a rebuilding trade. So this is stock PPR 1 quarterback, and this is getting up to 105, Jordan. So that is a pivotal point in rookie drafts in a start 1 format for sure this year. Trading Christian Kirk, a profile and a player we like. Obviously, some added competition with the Cardinals wide receiver core and passing game in general. So Christian Kirk, Darius Slayton, very successful coming from the day 3 pool of wide receivers last year, and 301. So you get 301, Slayton, and Kirk moving up, moving your chips in for 105.
And you said that is start 1, right?
Yes, not Superflex.
Yeah, I'm taking the pick because you're getting inside the line of the top 5 running backs. So we're talking Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we're talking Taylor, Swift, Dobbins, and Akers. So there's a top 5 there. I would say you see that as a top 5. I would say roughly about 2/3 of the time, about 1/3 of the time, you'll see a wide receiver crack that. In terms of if you're just looking start 1, that bumps down to 106. That decision bumps down to about 107 when you're talking in Superflex when you add Burrow and Tua in there. But you're going to get a shot at one of those guys. At worst, you're going to get the worst of those 5. That is I think a good cost to pay. I like Christian Kirk. I like the profile of Christian Kirk. I just struggle to see how he's going to be a big time difference maker with DeAndre Hopkins, with Larry Fitzgerald still there. That you have to presume a big jump out of Kyler Murray, which I think you and I are both hopeful. But just saying for certain that that's going to happen is not a sure thing. Darius Slayton's a day 3 prospect. The hit rate on those guys is 5%. He is not inside the line of that yet. He has not come across that threshold yet. So I'm pretty skeptical on that. And 301, I mean, in a good class, that's nice, but you're looking day 2 wide receiver or later day 2 running back in that range. I mean, 105 is a premium piece. So I would take 105 pretty comfortably.
Yeah, and this is regardless of direction.
Yes.
We're not going to address that contending versus rebuilding in this setting because, again, consolidating is universal. Saving roster spots, 301 is nice, but if it's a 3 or 4 round rookie draft, how much of a downturn is 301 typically to even getting a player on the first come first serve or waiver wire after your rookie draft. So I think that is an important notation and Christian Kirk, again, I am one of the biggest Christian Kirk fans out there. And to me, this is a crushing value scenario of using Christian Kirk to pivot up. Slayton is a sell player, probably late first, early second valuation. So if both of, if you're trading a late first and another late first, early second for a mid first in this class, that is absolute, a gold mine of insulation, value, and profile, because 301 is not going to move the needle. And I think Christian Kirk is going to level off as a wide receiver, like a low wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 4, over the next, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. Again, good situation. They bring in Hopkins, though. That is a huge anvil, because we were looking forward to Larry Fitzgerald getting out of that pecking order, and Christian Kirk might be able to run with things with 125 plus targets. That's not going to occur now. Now he's basically in kind of Will Fuller zone, right? He's going to be in that shadow of DeAndre Hopkins for the foreseeable future. So there's a lot of limitations there, unless Kyler Murray literally becomes the oracle where he can produce 2 top 12, top 16 wide receivers. And that is an absolute tall order, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of risk in breaking down 105 into pieces like that. And I think you're going to hear another theme of be very careful if you're trading the best player in the deal of how far down you venture, because the insulation goes down. And also you're taking up roster spots, which is not an insignificant part of a deal when you say that person just cleared 2 roster spots in addition to getting the best player at 105, best player, best asset. Do want to remind you, subscribe, rate, and review the Football Guys shows through your listening apps. Sign up for the daily email update at footballguys.com/free, as well as sign up for the FFPC Football Guys Players Championship. You get a free $35 team just when you register, and the drafts are going on now. That link is myffpc.com/footballguys. In this episode, we discuss Clyde Edwards-Helaire in depth, Jonathan Taylor, Leonard Fournette, Chris Carson, plus dynasty trading strategy. I'm Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.